Hi everybody, this is Daniel with Fun Ukulele Projects again. Sorry about the long gap between videos. In the last video I mentioned that I was going to be doing my next video on modifying this red Vorson as a gift for a friend. Well, I did the modification shortly after I did that video, and then I found an issue with the Camise pickups, which alters the way I install them now. And that issue is that, the Camise pickups come in a plastic case. The transducer head is in a little plastic case, and it's normally hot glued together, and that's about all they do to it. Well, one of the pickups in this particular instrument wasn't hot glued together and came apart after it was installed. And so in order to fix it, I literally had to drill holes in the back so I could access the transducer heads and put it back together. And then I wanted to check this one, be sure it was glued on. And so when I did that, to me it started looking sort of like a face. So I decided to add a mouth. Different people say it looks like different things. To me it looks like either a red Squidward from SpongeBob SquarePants or sort of like a little ghost or alien face, but it's sort of cute. Once I was done with that, it still sounds nice. It's right-handed now. It's got the side sound port. I just decided that I wanted to make one that didn't have holes in the back for my friends, so I got a pink Vorson, and that's what the video is going to be. Rather than just doing a quick video, highlighting, this video is going to be rather long because I'm not showing myself doing every step, but I'm explaining in detail everything that I do in the modification in the video. And then at the end of this video, I'll show you the finished pink Vorson, and I'll play it. I'll probably play the blue one more because they all three have pickups, and that's the only one that's left-handed now. Anyway, thank you. Enjoy the video. Well, hello, everybody. I have in front of me the box that has the pink Vorson I'm going to be modifying for a friend. I mentioned, already explained in the introduction why I have a pink one and why I'm doing this rather than the red one. And so I thought, since I'm going to be modifying this ukulele, I would start from square one and just quickly run through an overview. I'm not going to actually show myself doing everything, but I'm actually going to tell you how I do everything and certain issues that could come up that you need to watch out for if you choose to do some of these projects yourself. So first off, when I get a new Vorson, as you can see, it's the pink one, and it's really pink. I take them out of the plastic. That's a no-brainer. The very first thing I do is check the tuners, because I've gotten, I think this is the fourth I purchased that's specifically a Vorson, and I check to see how stiff they are. And virtually every Vorson I've gotten, it was quite stiff. I've seen videos where people complain about how stiff they are and they're wondering about how long they'll last. And so what I do immediately, once I get them, this one's very stiff. That's going to be what the C, G is okay. E is okay. A doesn't feel terrible. I noticed there was a little bit of residue, which is actually good because these used to come completely dry, but these are still quite dry. And the first thing I do with these is lubricate the tuners before I do anything else. I make sure I've got my spinner here, and I'll either spray WD-40, or in this case I will use trusty 3-in-1 oil. And I will simply put a drop or so, one drop right here, one drop down at the shaft, and then I will, actually right now, which one am I working on? Working on the E, so I'm going to spin this way to loosen it. It's going the right way. Just spin it quickly, get it nice and loose. I'm going to tighten it back up. But in this case, I'm not going to tighten it back up because I have other strings that are going to go on And in this case, I'll just go in both directions. Let the lubrication work in. Then I move to the next one. Since I started down on the E, I'll go to the A. A little there and a little in there. Start loosening it. Start tightening it. Loosen. It's good to count. If you're going to loosen and you plan on tuning it back up, count how many times you loosened, tighten up the same amount, and then you have a good starting spot. This one feels really good. I'm going to put a little more on the shaft itself in this case. When you spray WD-40, it penetrates faster, but it's also messier. It's more cleanup. And it doesn't take much time doing this. Show you what I'm doing. Just spinning each direction. Move to the next one. Loosen. Tighten. Loosen. Tighten. That's all I'm going to do for that. I wipe it down. And some oil will come out a little bit at a time. But you do that once and you pretty much don't have to do it again. And that gives you a nice adjustable tuner. That's the main thing I've got to do with that. Now, moving on to the different modifications I'll make to this ukulele for my friend. These don't come with side fret markers. I'll be putting side fret markers in them. I'll be putting a side sound port in it. I'll be putting a pickup in it. And I'll explain what I do to do each of those steps. I'll also be adjusting the action. I'll measure the action first and see where it is, and I'll adjust it. When you adjust the action, adjust the saddle first. And then if you need to, you can adjust the nut. And a lot of times you don't need to with these. I had a couple that were too high. You can file them down like you would any other nut. Just be careful, because once you go too far, the only fix then would be to cut it off and to make a new nut. It's a $25 ukulele. So I still will adjust mine because I like them to be just perfect. Now, to put the side fret markers in, I hand drill virtually all my ukuleles, regardless of how much they cost. And with this one, you know, being an inexpensive ukulele, I'll hand drill it also. But what I start with is an awl. And I will just line up by eye. I'm not going to take time to do it because it would just take too long to go through this video. I'm just going to explain to you how I do every step. I line up by eye, roughly the center point where I can see this dot. So I'm lining up with the dot. And then I'm also lining up roughly middle vertically, and I can check that from the side. And then I push. And when you're pushing with the awl, I'll also go in a circle like this. Once I have a very, very basic hole, then I can use my thumb for support as I get right back into exactly the same hole, and I'll make it larger. It doesn't have to be real big. I'm just pushing in and just wobbling a little bit like this in a circle to have a circular hole for the tip of the drill bit to go into. It's a very thin fretboard, and I'm using plastic fret markers, 1/16 of an inch plastic fret markers from Stu Mac. So I have a 1/16 drill that I just keep inside this bag with the fret markers. And, you know, I'll hand drill it. I'm not going to drill this one right now. I'm just going to show you what I do, and I'll explain where the possible pitfalls are when someone does drill something. Doesn't mean you can hold it against your body. You can hold it any way that's somewhat sturdy. And I'll line the drill up, put it against the hole, make sure it's perfectly against the hole. And I would usually put it against my body, but I want to keep this where the camera can see it. But once it's against the hole, and line it perfectly, once you know it's against the hole, then in this case, you have very little room for error. So if anything, point ever so slightly down, not up or you'll go through the fretboard, but you point slightly down, and you don't have to go very deep. You know, you go a 16th or a 32nd, oh, not 32nd, a 16th or, you know, an eighth of an inch is more than deep enough, but even a 16th is fine because you're just going to be putting a little piece of plastic in here. These are hollow, so you're more likely to go through it if you go much more than a 16th of an inch. But anyway, once you have it there, the next thing you want to do is make sure you have a little bit of positive pressure as you're pushing down when you turn the drill on. I'll do this one hole actually. You need a little bit of positive pressure or else the drill will wander, but when you have that positive pressure, turn on very slowly to start. And that's it. That's the hole. Now I have fret hole number 1. I'll put the plastic fret marker in it. I'll put a little glue in it. I'll use probably B3000 glue. And then I'll set the fret marker in it, and then I'll use a razor blade to shave it off, smooth it out. Then I can always sand that and come back with some rubbing compound, like you would use auto rubbing compound to smooth all the frets when I'm done. But that's what I'll do for the next 2 holes. The next thing I'll do is I'll put the side sound port in. Now to put the side sound port in, I'm going to mark off and be sure I'm exactly centered at the point that I do it. I like to put it where it's almost centered on this, you know, upper bout, but I want it centered in here. Now it's sort of hard to mark on plastic, so that's where tape comes in. I'll run some tape straight across this, like so. Now I have something I can easily mark on to lay out exactly where I want that. And in the case of this instrument, it took a lot of time when I did my blue ukulele, which is behind me. But once it was done, then I knew exactly where I liked the hole. So now I'll just line this up like so, and then I can get the center point from this roughly to where I want it here. And then I'll put the center point on this. I can tell already this tape's going to move over a little to get the hole set up right. Once that's done, and I have it marked out, I'll go back to the awl. I will get that point. I'll press down, make sure I've got a nice starting point. Then I will use the tip of this drill bit just to widen the hole, not to go through this piece. And the reason for that is the way that I put the hole into this plastic ukulele. And I'm going to emphasize, do not ever do what I do this plastic ukulele to a wooden ukulele. You will destroy it. There is a proper way to put a side sound port in a wooden ukulele, you know, if you want to modify one, and I'll show that in a future video. But what I do for these plastic ones is I use a hole saw. You know, some of you might have never seen a hole saw before. Anyone that works in construction, you've seen these. You know, these are used to put holes in doors. They come in all different sizes. Here's a hole saw kit that I have. So they can go from very small to quite large. You know, anyone that's ever used a door has probably turned a doorknob, and that doorknob, whether it's the doorknob style or the other style where you've got like the little lever and a big handle, those holes are put in, the holes that go through the door are put into the doors with hole saws. This works great for something like this because plastic's really tough and it's not going to shred. But these teeth are really aggressive. and they will just destroy a wooden instrument. So once again, do not do what I'm doing on a wooden instrument. I don't want to get comments, I tried what you did and it ruined my wooden ukulele. I didn't say to do it on a wooden ukulele. Plastic ukulele, and if you do it wrong, you can still wreck the ukulele. One of the big problems with hole saws is that, these are designed so that, these come apart, you can put different sizes on them. These drills can wear out, and so they have set screws so that you can put new drills in or get this one sharpened. And that creates a bit of an issue, because in construction, if you're using one of these things, I'm going to put this in the drawer fast so hopefully the camera can pick up what I'm about to do. As I was saying, in construction, when you use one of these things, it doesn't matter if that center drill is perfectly centered, because once it grabs into the wood, it's going to be going fine, and this will be making a hole, and the hole is going to be covered. Doesn't matter if it chips out a little on the back either. Once again, there's going to be metal on either side of that hole. I don't want wobble here. So what I do is I shimmed it. And I'll explain what I'm talking about in a second. So when I turn this on, that point never varies. It's perfectly in the center. But you can notice this larger drill has a little bit larger point. That's why I use the 1/16 of an inch bit to give a flatter, shallower point, a little wider, not point, but divot, so that then this will fit into that. Then I drill in, and I have a nice, a nice centered drill. Then I just have to keep it level as I drill it. I have to brace the ukulele. That's not a problem. Once again, I better mention that too. If you're going to try to do this, brace it with something. If you brace it yourself, you have to be careful using one of these. And if you've never used one, this is not the way to do it, because this has a lot of torque. And when it gets that instrument, if you're not holding it properly, it's going to pull really hard. I'm just showing how I did it on these ukuleles. Now, what I did to get that drill perfectly centered is very simple. See where the set screw is? The set screw holds this bit in place. And what ends up happening as a result of that, there needs to be just a few thousandths of an inch play for the bit to go in easily. And so it gets pushed against the other side. So the screw goes in here and is pushing the bit against this side of the hole. So I basically used some thin paper on this side of that hole between the bit and the inside of this base, and that I adjusted it, used a different size pieces of paper until I got it to where the bit was perfectly centered. Those were the shims that I put in. So now I can drill this hole without any trouble. So that's how I put the hole in the side for this, once again, plastic ukulele. Now when I do this, I'll drill it. I've used these things for years, for decades. And so I'm very used to using them, so I don't have any trouble holding it and drilling it and knowing when to hold tighter. If you have never had experience with one of these, get someone that has. I don't want anyone to hurt themselves doing it, but I'm just explaining once again, this is how I did it. When it comes to the pickup, there's something that I do now with every one of these pickups I get. And this is because of the red ukulele, and I already explained what happened in the introduction. But I'll explain it again. One of Camise normally uses some hot glue in one or two spots on the inside to hold these together. One of the transducer heads in the red ukulele didn't have any glue, and so it actually popped apart. And when it popped apart, what happens is the transducers on this part and the part that gets glued to the instrument is there, and the transducer is just flopping around. So in order to fix that, and also in order to improve the setup, I used, let me hold on one second. What's it? Yeah, B7000 glue. And I take it apart, I put B7000 glue all the way around it, glue it back together. Now I know it's permanently put together, and also B7000 is waterproof. Since these are plastic ukuleles, if it does get dropped in water or something, these have been completely glued all the way around. and the holes have been sealed up, so it should be quite waterproof. And yeah, the glue job looks really good on this. This will go in tomorrow. I need to let the glue set. I want to explain how I put the pickup in. With a wooden ukulele, oftentimes there's a seam in the back, and that gives you center side to side, and then you just have to measure top to bottom. I use tape again, top to bottom. I can put it roughly where the center is. That'd be about the right spot. But once again, as I said, wood has that seam. Obviously plastic doesn't have a seam, it's injected and molded. So what I do have as a point of reference, and the camera won't pick it up, but there's a line here, and there's a line here. I'm going to show it here. I was out of camera, I think. There's a line roughly here and roughly here that are the mold lines for what is the little tail block. It's molded plastic tail block they have in this ukulele. So I'm actually going to put tape down this line right here, tape down that line right there, have a piece in the center, and then I will put diagonals, 3 diagonals, and then from there I'll know the center point, and that's where I'll drill the hole. This hole will be a 7/16 of an inch hole because that will fit the pickup. The way these pickups work is very interesting. You see all these washers here, and there's a nut here, and there's the big pickup end here. And you look at that and you go, well, how's that going to go in? You've got to have the hole this size, and there's bigger on both sides. Well, what happens is this. The strap button comes off. And when the strap button comes off, you notice there's another internal nut underneath the strap button. This one will come off. I turn it the right way. There it goes. I'm trying to just spin it off. As this one comes off, then what you're left with is the flange washer that sits on this side of the nut. I'll take that off. Now, all of this here will get fed through the sound port. Once the hole is in place, once I've drilled the hole, you can put either a wire, I use like an A string, that old A string. You strap it through those holes, and then you use that, you put that wire through the hole that will be drilled in this tail block. You use this nut on this side. You notice how big this is. That's because with wooden instruments, you can have a tail block that's this wide, this wide. You measure the width of that tail block, and that's where you set this nut. And you leave these washers here because they bite into the tail block. And then once it's pulled all the way through and it's sitting here, you want to set it up so that this edge here is just barely flush with the outside of the ukulele. So it'll look like this. With plastic ukuleles, they tend to bend a little bit, so there's a little time-consuming procedure I have to do because the little tail block section on these plastic ukuleles is hollow. So once I have the hole drilled, then I make these little spacer blocks, 2 of them out of corian. One will go on either side of the hole, and they will keep the hollow tail block from bending in on itself. Once these are in place, once I put that underneath and fed it through like this, it'll sit right about there. Then from the outside, I'll place this on. I'll tighten it up with the nut. And then it's in place, then I'll put the strap button portion of it back on. Now, once everything's in place like that, then I'll go ahead and put the transducer heads in. And the way I'll do that, I made a special tool that I use for that. And actually, I think it's in the case still. I created this little tool, and it's really easy to work with because I use a flashlight, and if you saw my previous video, you see how well these things light up from the inside. And so I know where the fans are, and I know I want to put one transducer head here, one transducer head here, because that's where these large transducer heads are going to fit properly. And so then this is actually exactly the right size for me to go underneath and just set it up and in place like that. I use a little bit of double stick tape right here. It's actually that, like the 3M, it's like you mount things to walls with it. I'll put one piece here, and then I will touch it a few times so that the tack of the top of it is very, very minimal, because I just need it to hold the edge of this just long enough for me to slip it underneath and then put it back in place. What I'll use to put it in place is, where do I have it? I need to get some more. I think the one I have is dry, but I'll use ABS weld, basically the plumbing weld. If you've ever seen someone working with putting together ABS drain pipe, they'll have these little cans, and it's the weld that bonds the ABS together very permanently, and it holds together really quickly. So I can put those in there, put it up, hold it, for 30 seconds or so. This will pull off. That's permanently in place. Then I do this side. By putting a flashlight on the inside, I can see very clearly where the fins are, so it's very easy to put this up and in and set it right in place. If I was doing this as a wooden instrument, I would use these on a lesser expensive. They work okay, but I wouldn't use it on a really expensive instrument because these transducer heads are so large. K&K transducer heads are much smaller, and they'll have much less impact on the overall resonance of the instrument. These have resonance to spare, so it actually tightens up the sound a little bit in a good way when these get installed. And so I use these here. Plus, a $25 instrument, if you buy these one at a time, they're like $20. I buy them 5 at a time so that they're not quite as expensive. But that's the project. So once again, I'll be drilling 3 more holes using the same technique I showed you. I will reposition this tape in the right spot, and then I'll center this. I'll get the mark. I will start the hole with the awl so that I can accurately get a nice shallow but wide hole with the 1/16 of an inch bit. Then I'll come back with the hole saw, very carefully drilling it so that I get my nice sound port. I want to emphasize again, do not ever use a hole saw on wood. You will destroy your instrument. Also, if someone's going to try this and you happen to have a hole saw, be sure to brace this and don't use much pressure. Less is more with this thing. Once you give enough pressure for the teeth to be holding position, use a slow speed and just let the teeth do their work. Take your time and it'll go through. The nice thing about the curve, it only goes through a part at a time, and so it doesn't actually completely rip out of your hands. I just brace it carefully and drill and put the hole in it. If someone wants to try this, you could brace it with blocks or something, have someone hold the blocks. You can even make a clamp set, but that's an awful lot of work. Once I decided that with a $25 instrument, since I've used these things for years, and I know what they do and I know what to expect when drilling with them, I was fine just drilling it and holding it, and I've done this several times and I have not had any problems. So that's the hole saw part of it. Then to review one more time, this comes apart, this comes off, the washer comes off, there's a nut underneath it, all of that comes out. You leave these parts on the inside. There are 2 washers there. This is a locking nut. This bites into the wood from the inside, and that washer cinches up against it. And you fish these through like so. You take advantage of the holes that are on the inside of this jack. Put some wire or string through those holes. You can put a little knot. I'll sometimes just tape it together so there's like a little loop. Put it through this way. Pull it through. Get this measured to the right height. You may need to put it in and pull it back out a couple times to be sure you have it measured exactly where you want it. Then put the washer back in place. Put the nut back in place. Make sure it's snug. Once it's snug, put this back in place. Once that's in place, then I install these heads. This pickup setup is designed to go for, you can use it on guitars and whatnot. There's extra coil here. And it comes with a little piece of plastic you can tie it all down with. And so I will put this right around here somewhere. Use the zip tie, I'll coil it up and put it in. One negative to the setup is that every so often you can hear a little bit of rattle or something with all this extra wire, but that can then be, it could be taped. There are other things that can be done. Down the road I'm going to get these bare and I'll just cut them to the length and I'll solder them to jacks. But for now I'm just using these because they're inexpensive and they work. First off, I want to say thank you to everybody that's made it to this point in the video. I did mention I'm possibly playing the blue one a little bit more, but I'm not going to do that because this video is very long. It's mainly a how-to video. So what I have is the finished product right here. And there were two modifications that I did that I didn't mention, just because there's so many that I didn't get around to it. Here are the side fret markers. Here's the side sound port. The pickup's installed. I also made a bone saddle for it, and I put a strap button on it too, since it has a strap button on the the pickup jack. Now, the one consideration you got to take when you're putting a strap button on a plastic instrument like this is that the hollow walls are fairly thin, so that screw really needs some reinforcement. In the back, there's that hollow tail block. And I mentioned that I actually put little spacers inside the hollow tail block to give it strength for when I tighten it together. What I do here is I drill a hole that's no bigger than the shaft of the screw itself, and then I have plenty of plastic for the screws to bite into when I put the screw in. But in addition to that, I put B7000 adhesive on the shaft of the screw, and I put adhesive on both sides of the black washer. So the screw's being glued to the body, the washer's being glued to the body, and the strap button's being glued to the washer, as well as being screwed in place, just to give a little extra stability. I have it plugged in right now. And I can play a couple chords upside down. It's just really fun to play. I'll play part of a little hymn that I put together if I can make it through it upside down. That's about the best I'm going to get out of it upside down. Anyway, this is the project. They sound really nice. They sound nice acoustically. They sound nice plugged in. Yes, they're plastic instruments. They're $25 instruments. They're fun instruments, and that's what, to me, ukuleles are all about, having fun. So this was a fun ukulele project, and have some fun playing and practicing your ukulele today. Take care.